Okay, excellent. We're sitting here. We've got a nice cup of coffee. It's a nice October morning, fresh in October. Jack has just had his world's worst drive across the north side. So, let's start. What's ASD?
So ASD is autism spectrum disorder. So it's just basically it's a wide spectrum that can cover from kids who well, not even just kids, but like just people in general, across the board from like a sensory input or output perspective. Okay, so it's to do with your sensory system and your like it's a neurological disorder where one's ability to regulate their senses is different to a regular person. So you could be hyposensitive or hypersensitive in a lot of cases. So that's where the spectrum comes across. So it's hypo would be the opposite of hyper. So it'd be like where you wouldn't be very sensitive to some things. Okay. So like say if we're looking at a child that with autism who would be like hypersensitive to sounds or taste, whatnot, they wouldn't be able to deal with those very well. So that's where they get overstimulated. Whereas that same child or a different child or just a different person, they could be hyposensitive to other stimuli. So they might not be as stimulated like audibly or verbally or so okay. Like that's where the spectrum comes across.
Yeah. And each person is different completely. In terms of what they may or may not be sensitive to. That's a key part, isn't it? That it's a very individual condition.
I think, but what is important to note is that people with autism have an actual like different makeup in their brain, in large part to a person who's neurotypical. So like we can talk about the spectrum, okay, and the fact that everyone is different, but then we can get into very vague terms and say like, oh, everyone's a little bit autistic. But there is
it's like a spectrum of behavior that I think that's sometimes what people kind of fail to understand when people talk about autism is that when they go, but hold on, I'm kind of sensitive to such and such a thing. Does that make me autistic? But of course, that's not what we're talking about. It's not a general, everybody has some element of this. It is something that is diagnosable and it is a condition that's... Yeah.
And then like you could go all day talking about is autism or any kind of pathos or any kind of disorder, is it the symptoms that you show, or is it, say, the mechanism that works in one's brain to cause these things? And I have a lot of interest in this because for me, like in my day-to-day life, if I'm like while I'm working in the gym or whatnot, maybe it's not, maybe it is noticeable, but I would assume I present as relatively neurotypical as someone who's diagnosed. But like the mechanisms of like how of what's going on in my brain, is one of an autistic person. Like it's like that. I'm fundamentally. It works fundamentally different than a neurotypical person's brain. Like if you want to go down to the scientific level.
So what you're seeing, it might be the same behavior, say, as I'm exhibiting, but how we're getting to that point is very different.
So like there's the whole concept of masking and like presenting in a certain way to deal with your situation. And I suppose everyone masks in a certain way. Everyone tries to put on a face or put on an act in a certain way to go about their day, but in an autistic sense, like they try to mask how they are dealing with like sensory inputs to conform to like a neurotypical world. So like in my example, like I've recently, going off a little bit of a tangent, I've recently moved up to Dublin like since the start of the year, so it's my first time like being outside the home. So I would have found the transition a bit difficult, because I would have been I'm now in like situations where I'm sharing with other people. I'm actually right now I'm sharing with another jiu-jitsu brown belt from Tullamore.
Okay, well that's not too bad.
His name's Tyg Phelan. So we used to kill each other all through the years. But like even though like we're pretty comfortable with each other, I still kind of have to mask and like my full true autistic self, if you want to say.
Right.
Where some of my behaviors wouldn't be quite fully me. So if you were to, I often say this to some of my friends, like if you were to put a camera or like a hidden CCTV camera like up in my home when I'm back home, like in Tullamore, how I would present and behave would be like, it might be a little bit uncanny, or it might be like a little bit not all, well, it could be off-putting, like whereas I kind of act a little bit more for lack of a better word, goofy or like silly, and like I'd stim as well.
Okay.
So like
can you explain what stimming is there for the people at home?
So stimming was just short for self-stimulation. So it's just anything to do to help you regulate your sensory system. So like if people want like a motor output to help them regulate their nervous system when they're overwhelmed and overstimulated, like some like basic things like that would be in the like that would be familiar to like the average person would be like flapping their hands, which like I wouldn't do that, but like maybe like some kind of verbal output, like saying like humming over and over again, or like
rocking
singing,
back and forth.
Rocking back and forth.
For kids especially.
Different things. Like there's a lot of different things. So basically anything that I find it kind of centers you back, and like it makes you focus on like one stimulus as opposed to.
It's always interesting when because a lot of times when counselors talk about people dealing with stress, we talk about neurotypical people dealing with stress. They'd say, okay, find something like a stress ball, something to squeeze, something to output, something, and it's very similar. It's essentially like a way of self-regulating, self-calming, and kind of self-soothing, and saying, okay, you know, deep breathing, stuff like that. That's what's recommended for normal. But this is the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Same kind of thing. Okay, right.
Just sometimes it can be a little bit more intense, and that's where the spectrum goes across as well. So
And I think for anybody watching at home who doesn't have, I presume I'm talking to mainly jiu-jitsu people. I think we're talking to mainly jiu-jitsu people here.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would recognize the concept of having something physical to do to calm you. I think, you know, if you're talking to jiu-jitsu people, they know, oh, wait, hey, when I go to jiu-jitsu and I do jiu-jitsu, I feel calmer afterwards. But it's a very similar thing, right? But this would be you in the home, but it's not you so much in house sharing now, is it? Or
like I'm kind of like, you obviously have to be mindful of other people's faces. So like I guess my family is like a little bit used to it by now. So like sometimes I'd be like a little bit loud, or like or like I like to sing a lot at home, much to the demise of my brothers and my mum at home. But and like to kind of just things like that, or just and just like talking in a different way. Like at the moment, like I guess I kind of talk relatively monotone. Hopefully for the listeners, they don't find me droning on. So like my cadence would be like a little bit different. It's hard to explain without like
actually knowing you, right? I think the point is that you're so how you get here to present to the world is different, is less natural. Would that be a fair way of saying it? It's not as it's something that you have to think about a lot more.
Like it wouldn't be automatic. It's more like a manual drive, right. If you get me. So like and I can't put myself in anyone else's shoes, so I don't know what it's like for other people to like socialize, like, or what the process in someone's head is when they're like having an interaction with someone. But like I'd be conscious of things like eye contact, or I'd have to physically, or not like mentally cue myself to like make eye contact, or to like I'd notice my hands are like in a certain place, and like right now, like I don't know where to grab onto the coffee.
Your hands rising up. So don't worry, that's common in front of the camera as well.
So like some things are universal, but then some things are like very a little bit more unique, like where I not to make myself feel like I'm so unique, or like I don't have any challenge. I have challenges that no one else faces, or anything.
Yeah.
But like it still wouldn't be as natural to me. So like when I was a kid, eye contact would have been very bad for me. Like I wouldn't have been able to look at someone's eyes. I've just been looking here, and I'm probably going to cringe at this looking back at the video, because I think I do something where I don't even notice it myself sometimes, where my eyes kind of shift like side to side, or like I don't know where I'm quite looking sometimes.
Yeah.
It probably will come up in the video afterwards.
Not especially now that you've noticed, but actually this is actually a really hard interaction. So it's something I had to get used to. Because like again, from interviewing people like this, or from doing the TV before and stuff like that, suddenly you have to, do I have to stare directly at their face? What do I have to do here? Because actually when I have conversations, I'm always fiddling with things and foosting with things and, you know, moving around. I very rarely sit down and go, hey, you know, it feels like interrogative, like, you know, when you do that. And like again, for me, like I'm checking the screen here and stuff like that, and I'm thinking about, but it's kind of easy for me. By the way, I didn't start the timer though. We had discussed so well before. I just noticed it now. It's a good thing I checked the screen there.
Great.
So now we're going to go way over time or way under time. I don't know which. So like take me back to starting jiu-jitsu, and obviously like you're, what age are you now?
24.
You're 24. Okay. So at 24 years of age, you're mature now. You've got a self-understanding. You've got like kind of like,
I'd like to think I do. Maybe.
At least you're getting there. Well, listen, I'm 46 and I don't have a self-understanding. So, you know, but you've got like a sense of like, okay, this is where I am in the world. I'm an adult. This is my condition. This is how I approach life with it. But obviously it's not that way when you're a teenager in particular. Because when you're a teenager, you're just becoming self-aware. And again, having spoken to some people with autism spectrum disorder about this, it is a difficult, like puberty and being a teenager is a difficult time for every kid. But for someone like yourself coming up and suddenly beginning to understand that there is a different way of approaching the world than you're approaching it, how was that? How did that go?
I would guess, like, I would have found it fairly difficult in secondary school. That was a pretty difficult time in my life, and I would have actually talked about this a little bit. I had a podcast with Andrew McGann about 5 years ago. We were talking about this, and I was looking back. I look back with like a certain amount of fondness for that period of my life, because I was just coming out of school, and I talked a lot about it like during the podcast. So it took up most of it. And a little bit myopic in a sense, because like I think I was like, that's all I knew, that kind of life, and I think I had like some resentment towards like people in my
in your secondary
school, like for treating me in such a way, like during my problems that I would have been facing and whatnot. So like I would have had like a bit of like an identity crisis in terms of like whether I thought I actually had autism or not, because sometimes like I tried to convince myself that I didn't, especially during my earlier years, to try to fit in a little bit more. Right. And I had a hard time trying to assimilate, and like I didn't know whether I should just like go like try to assimilate or just go cold turkey, where like I didn't communicate with anyone. So I think I've found a little bit more of a happy marriage of that now
between those two things.
But like I think people would have like when I was that age during teenage years would have noticed I was different in some kind of way. I think there's some sort of study, I might be butchering like the figures or whatever, but I think it was said that like if you were to communicate with an autistic person without them telling you, you'd get some kind of hint that there was something up with them within a second or two. Okay,
that so like sort of like a weird autistic Turing test.
It would register. Like you might not think, oh, he's autistic, but you might just like register. I think like they would have done brain scans or whatever that they register as slightly different. Yeah. So like I think I would have like all my life, like especially growing up, I would have got that vibe off other people
when they're talking to you. Okay, this guy knows him. Do you think? I mean, even knowing that there is science that maybe demonstrates that. Do you think some of that might have been self-conscious and so like?
Definitely. It probably would have been internalized from other experiences I would have had, and then I probably would have presented myself as a certain way to try to.
Now you're overcompensating.
To overcompensate.
And when you're overcompensating, it gets worse and worse. And probably then you're probably talking about that masking element as well. That becoming worse and worse, and that masking is quite stressful, right? That's.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It's like basically like playing a role all day.
Yeah. Sometimes like I'll like if I'm having a stressful time, or like I suppose everyone like goes through times of stress and whatnot, but like if I'm dealing with people socially, I find like extended social time can be very draining on me, where like if I'm coming home, like I need like 2 days to recover.
Okay, right.
And like I tend to kind of isolate myself. I find like hiding myself away in the dark room is one of my coping strategies. I know it's and then like I try to think like, is like, one, it's helping me cope in a certain way, but two, like, am I doing more damage to myself by isolating myself more? So that's something I've had to struggle with.
Right.
So like I do need my rest time. Like after I need, like after I have like
recharge the social
to recharge
battery a little bit,
but then sometimes it can be it won't be self-serving in a certain way after a certain point where I'm just isolating myself from everyone else, and I'm not. So that's a struggle that I'm trying to overcome, like where I'm trying to figure out like yeah, there's certain times where I feel like, am I... How would I phrase it? There's times where I can start to feel lonely, and maybe I try to...
Kind of step back a little bit too much, maybe?
Step back a little bit too much, and I might get into this vicious cycle of isolating myself, and then I get upset about isolating myself, and then
it's a downward spiral then after that. Yeah, so it takes effort to correct that. Yeah, and obviously you do that on quite a regular basis. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is like, just to come back to secondary school. Because,
okay, perfect.
Let's revisit secondary school, because that secondary school age is really difficult, and of course. Coaching teenagers here over the years, and of course I've got 2 teenagers at home, and I was once a teenager as well. It was a long time ago, but it did happen. I think that for everybody socially, that's a really, really hard time, because you're going from a very simple primary school level, relatively simple social structure, which is, do you want to play? Yes or no? Teacher's here, teacher will help me. And now you're going from classroom to classroom. Everybody's kind of playing this weird hierarchical social game that you have to figure out. Everybody has to figure out one way or another. And then, of course, if you're slightly maybe behind the curve a little bit, it's twice as hard. Yeah. So you're talking, you're stuck in this situation at this stage in your life where you're going, do I stick or do I twist? Do I go for it and like really try and pretend that I'm like this, or do I just go, screw you guys, I'm going home to do what I want? Yeah, which is not socialize with you guys. Yeah. And did you consciously bring yourself out of that? Was that something, or did it emerge?
I think that whole idea of like the hierarchical structure of school, I was nearly like hyper obsessed with that in a way, because I was trying to make sense, and just like in my brain, like I tried to come across it from a logical perspective, like okay, like this is where I nearly overanalyzed it to the point where other kids weren't analysing it, so I would have like been drafting in my head who's the top of
who's
this,
the top dog here?
Who's the top dog, and like I'd be trying to like find where my spot was in there, in a very literal sense, nearly too much, to the point where like I might say something I don't know exactly what I would say, and like other kids would find that like a little bit off-putting.
It's like, oh hey, wait a minute,
like
this is
like he's laying it out very literally, like what this
is the way this is, you guys, but you were probably right. That's the funny thing about it is, and they just didn't like it being presented to them, which is probably a lot of it. And I think that's what like it's a autism is kind of known for a very literal perspective, isn't it? Like that's like I'm explaining the world to you. We were only talking about this last week to somebody, and actually I'm going to repeat myself because I said this in the podcast with Sean as well. I was like, the thing about having a friend with autism is that you're going to know exactly what they think within a very short period of time, or you'll notice that they're really uncomfortable. So you've got like two great options here. One is this person is not pretending at all. So if I have this person in front of me, if they tell me something, they mean it, more or less, within 5 seconds. So you and I had an interaction. We won't go into what it was, but it was after one of the tournaments when you refereed, and you came over to me and you made it. It wasn't a complaint, but it was like pointed out, look, something.
Okay.
We won't go into what it was.
Yeah.
But when you went away, I said, and it was actually the reason I asked the podcast is this is going to be a really interesting conversation, which it is already, because when you went away, I said, oh, okay. You know what? Somebody else would have gone home and gone to their friend. Yeah, I wasn't comfortable with that thing, and they would have talked about it with 10 other guys before eventually somebody would have come and said, hey, do you know, that was something I wasn't comfortable about. But you just walked up and said, no, this is straight in front of me. This is uncomfortable for me. I don't want to do that anymore. And I went, oh, okay. So now I have, instead of, from my perspective, instead of having a problem I don't know about, I have a problem I know about, which I can fix. And I find that as well, and I've got people in my life who are on the autism spectrum, and I find that it's like, look, this might offend you in the short term, but this is much better to know in the long term.
Yeah.
And I do find that is probably what maybe makes people uncomfortable. And probably when you're pointing out the social hierarchy to a bunch of teenagers, they're going, well, hold on a second, I don't like this, because you're talking about what I'm trying to do subtly, but you're talking about it really blatantly. Yeah. And but like at the same time, I think it's probably really bad in secondary school, but by the time you start to get older, it starts to become almost like a good quality. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah,
that's fair, yeah. It's like being blatant to being straight out in front of. Yeah.
There's an anecdote I can think of from when I think it was like 6th class, or maybe it might have been first year. One of my teachers used to talk about documentaries, and like he used to talk about like his interest in science and whatnot, and I was like watching documentaries at that age as well a lot, and he mentioned some fact. I just told him, sorry, that's wrong, like in front of the class, and no one let me forget about that for years after. So,
and were you right?
Yeah.
You didn't like it, right? So you're wrong.
So, but yeah, obviously, like I've nuance as well, like to know when to like speak up and whatnot, when it's the right time to speak up, not just to be I don't know if this is censored on an a-hole, but
no, you can
like
curse on this show.
Yeah, okay, grant.
An
arse. Anyways, but like it's so a little bit of maturity comes along with that as well, understanding what, like, when it's the right thing to say or not, if it's actually necessary to say or not. But
is this really required in this situation? I could have let this one slide, even though it's going to really irritate me. I'll give you a funny one as well, which I thought of last week. A kid came up with the father. It explains, like, look, my son's on the autism spectrum, and he wants to come up and watch a class. I said, yeah, cool. So he came up, and the kid walked up to me afterwards, and he said, I said, have you any questions? And the kid, I think he was about 11. And he said, yeah, so do you get the uniform straight away? And I said, well, if you want to, yeah. He said, well, look. And he said, like, again, 11, really mature. And he said, look, it's really important that I fit in very early.
Okay.
And I went, okay. And he said, so I'm going to get the uniform. So immediately, I'm going to talk to my dad about getting the uniform, because I'll need to fit in right away. And so now other kids would have gone, tugged on their mom's sleeve and gone, oh, God, and they would have muttered and mumbled. But he told me directly, no, this is important to me. So he'd obviously logically broken it down in his head. Look, I'm going to have to fit in here, so I'm going to come in. So he's already thinking, because the other thing that I think people confuse autism with is a lack of intelligence. But and again, we're not going to tar everybody with the same brush or equally give everybody the same qualities, but it's very often the opposite, isn't it? It's not a lack of intelligence. It's as you're saying, it's a sensory input-output sort of issue. And very often that sensory input is hypersensitive, as you're talking about, which makes people hypersensitive to social situations, social surroundings, and gives them almost a greater understanding and a greater logical understanding of it, just not necessarily the skills to deal with it.
Yeah.
Would that be, again, fair to say?
That's right.
I'm not,
yeah. There's a couple kids in so I'm the head coach in Jungle's kids program, so like not that they're necessarily told to me that they are autistic or that they're on the spectrum, but like I think I've good pattern recognition of.
You've got a good radar.
Good the equivalent of a gaydar. I don't know what you call it, autism dar or whatever you want to call it, but I think. There's certain kids that will bring up things to do with, say, the structure of the class that maybe the other kids don't think about, or maybe they do and they just never say it. But like the other kids will say like, "Oh, why are we doing things a certain way?" And like, or like they'll bring things up. Like there's I'm just trying to think of an example. Like there's this one kid. I won't mention any names for obvious reasons, but he's always talking about like there's a very righteous kid, so like he'll talk about what so he'll talk about to like another kid about, okay, so you need to tab. Right. But you tap right before.
Right.
Don't let it go too long, but you want to go right before you go.
The description and exactly when it should happen.
He talks about like the exact process of it, like in a very literal sense, and like he tries to overanalyze it. And then there's like, other kids that will pull us up if we're like like asking them to tie their belts to get back in line, and we're in the middle of tying our belts as well. And, like, we don't have them on, stuff like that. And they're right in that sense, like in a way.
Do you know what? It's one of the dictums of coaching that I always say is never ask anybody to do anything that you don't do yourself. You know, and if there's no better obviously than those kids to pull you up on exactly that behavior. So tell me about your own experience with jiu-jitsu. When did you start? When was your first jiu-jitsu?
I started about nine and a half years ago. So just before I turned 15.
Oh, right, okay. So right in that secondary school period.
Yeah.
Bang, slap in the middle. Yeah. About second or third year, would that be right?
Just after second year.
Okay. Yeah. And where was that initially?
That was in Tullamore.
SPG Tullamore.
Formerly Evolution MMA, formerly SVG Evolution, formerly SVG Tullamore, and now Air Grapple.
Okay. I've made a mistake now. Yeah.
No, it's gone through a few evolutions,
as we all have.
But so it's Air Grapple right now. But I did that. That's where I started. My first class was with Mike Davern, who's Kieran's brother.
Okay.
Who is a former MMA fighter as well. He's a jiu-jitsu brown belt. Very good. Like he'll train like every few months, and like he comes in and he wrecks everyone just after like
I've got a few of those guys here. Yeah. They take a big break, and then I always say to guys, when you watch that guy come in, get him on his first night, because that's going to be the only night they're going to get him. Yeah, one of those. I've got a couple of those guys here. Yeah.
So I originally started wanting to do MMA, and I didn't really know a whole lot about jiu-jitsu. I have a cousin who's a purple belt. He's been a purple belt a few years now because he's had like some time on and off from jiu-jitsu, but he helped me get into it as well. He's a few years older than me, and I remember him always talking about Anderson Silva and GSP, and I had a vague idea of what jiu-jitsu was, but I didn't know like what the essence of jiu-jitsu was. I just knew it was like some kind of form of fighting. Right. So like I wanted to do MMA like around the time of McGregor's rise. So this was like around just before the McGregor and Chad Mendes fight.
Okay, right. Peak.
Yeah.
Okay, that was when the place was going crazy. Yeah.
And so I remember, like, I was in the Gale Talk that summer as well, and I was like kind of boasting to my to the other people around that like I was doing MMA, and like I was showing them all these animalistic movements, like despite me only doing jiu-jitsu for like 2 months.
Yeah, exactly.
So like,
it's a normal 14, 15-year-old kid that I can imagine here. Yeah, I can imagine a few of my guys in there. Yeah.
So like I would have started off slow and then built it up, and like within the space of a few months I was training every day.
Yeah.
and it slowly took over my life. So like it was pretty much my only personality trait, and still is.
I'm sure that's not the case. But yeah, so did you find it helped with other aspects of your life? Did you find was there a crossover in terms of how you dealt with your life? Like did jiu-jitsu help?
Yeah, like I would have actually have done art for quite a while, say prior to me doing jiu-jitsu, and I would have done it like for a couple of years after I started jiu-jitsu as well. And I had this great art teacher, and this was outside of school. It was extracurricular, so I actually wasn't doing art inside of school. Funny enough, it was more kind of a release for me, I think. And he was a great art teacher called Vincent Devine. If you want to find him on Instagram, you can. But he was a great outlet for me, like in terms of helping me like put it like creatively.
Right. Yeah.
And it would have been like a small group. Like there was only like 4 kids in the group, and we all would have worked on like individual things and like individual styles of art, and not to be like too what's the word, like not fancy, too like up my own arse, but like he would have had me with this style like similar to Cubism. Okay. So like it was like kind of and like I would have drawn like a shape, and I would have split it up and put it back together again, kind of similar to Cubism, and like it was like fairly therapeutic for me, like to do that. And like he helped me like learn from like the different like art styles and like artists and whatnot, like to
okay. So this was like, an advanced level of
so somewhat you can say I wouldn't say my technical ability like actually doing them was great, but like the idea was kind of there in terms of the creative output. Right. So like and like we would have gone into like a lot of in-depth discussions and whatnot, like outside of art, and like he would have where I wouldn't have gotten that input from other people. So like I would have liked talking to adults a lot, because like kids at my age back then wouldn't have been able to engage in that kind of conversation.
But the conversation would be a bit more simplistic. So not stimulating enough.
Like I'm really grateful for those years, and I don't think I've said it to him in like a few years, but like I like if I ever saw him again, like I'd love to get in touch with him. But impacted you there. But I think jiu-jitsu kind of took over from that afterwards, where I was able to express myself creatively through movement. Not to sound too cliche or anything, or
you know what? It's funny because a lot of times people turn around and they give you one of those cliches, and I keep saying to people, well, you know, they're cliches for a reason. Like you know, people experience it that way, and it's not because it's, again, you do sound like a bit of a wanker when you say it. Like, you know, so I'm expressing myself. It's like, and everybody goes, it looks like you're hugging that guy's head. That doesn't look like expressing yourself. It's like, well, you know, you have to do it. You have to be there. And I guess the same thing, looking at Cubism, for example, if I look at Cubism, I scratch my head, but other people look at it and see the depth because they understand it, right? So fairly similar. When you understand jiu-jitsu, you know what you're talking about in terms of expressing yourself. Yeah. So I can appreciate what you're saying, but other people might look and go, "What?" No, but it's a good cliche for a reason. Yeah. And this was probably when you were about. Sorry, this when you're 15, and then and at this stage, it's taking over from the creative expression of art. Moving into jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and I also felt like. Like I would have been doing sports and like other activities like for like ever since I was a young kid. Like I would have been in like every single sport that my parents would put me into, and I would have been like mediocre to like below at pretty much all of them, like in the physical aspect. But because jiu-jitsu resonated with me a lot, I started getting some gratification from that, and I found that helped with my ego somewhat as well. So that further put me in there, and it took off from there. And
well, you can't build on failure. You can only build on success, can't you? I think what you're describing there is pretty common across like most of the kids, and you're probably the same when you're coaching in jungle. You find a lot of the kids who really excel at jiu-jitsu, it's not because they were failures at other sports, but it's because jiu-jitsu is the first thing that they're really good at, and they go, oh, wait a minute, You know, and I think there's a number of reasons for that. I'll go into it real quick. First of all, I don't think there's anybody that you have to pass to. I think that's a really important thing, right? And especially when we talk about...
I would have hated that as a kid. Or, well, like, the fact that no one would pass to me.
It's like, so you're not expected... There's no expectations from a teammate that they're, you know, you have to be good. I think that's the first thing. So a lot of times when kids are, like, maybe a little lack of coordination, maybe they haven't been athletically great before, maybe the social elements of teams, I found when I was a kid, the social elements of the teams, I found that really hard because I wasn't any good. So the moment you're not any good, you're the shit guy, right? So it's no matter how much I loved football, I was always crap. So the moment you're not getting the ball, and people are groaning when you are getting the ball, and when you screw up, it's another groan, and so you find it difficult, and you end up kind of on the outside, in the periphery. But when you're doing an individual sport like jiu-jitsu, well, now there's no expectations. It's only with you. So your expectations are what, and if you've got a supportive environment, a supportive coach, which I think generally speaking, jiu-jitsu is a supportive environment with supportive coaches, you got people who go, well, take your time, pal. It's okay, it'll come. You know, and that's really great, you know. So that was 15, and then...
So I would have only done the teens classes for a few months at that stage because I was pretty much bigger than all the other teens. Like after about 3 months, I was in the adults classes. So I think that was a big thing as well, that I was in the sport surrounded by mature people, mature adults, like instead of being in a team of like other kids where I was kind of vying for like the hierarchy,
the same hierarchical stuff we were talking about before.
If I'd like to touch on as well, right before as well, I would have actually been on a hockey team. So it was a mixed hockey team for like about 4 years, and the reason why it was mixed is because we didn't have enough boys for the team. So I was somewhat decent at it as well, but like I would have got a lot of slagging and like a lot of, like somewhat bullying as well on the outside because it was like there was far more girls than boys on the team. I think it was like there was a cap on 3 boys per team out of 10. But I actually enjoyed the sessions because I was kind of removed from the bullying a little bit and like the kind of the sagging, and maybe it was kind of more so to protect myself from that. Like it was more of like a kind of a defense mechanism to to not insert myself in the sport where there was that kind of structure and maybe like a little bit less confrontational where I didn't have to deal with that. But because
team environments are complex. Especially at kids at teenage level. Like it should be a relatively simple thing. You'd think play a sport together, but of course it's not. And can I ask you? Could you just go back again? Was your secondary school mixed or all boys?
Oh, so I had primary school was mixed, and then secondary school was all boys. So that was tough to go.
I don't know which is worse. We have this debate all the time. I was in an all boys school. My wife is a principal of a mixed school, you know. And we talk about it, and everybody always goes, "Oh, you know." Some people, like, you know, are still like, oh, boys and girls should be educated separately. That's much better. But I think in terms of the complexities of the social environment, the boys and girls together, you would think it's more complex and you would think it's worse. But actually, I think that hierarchical stuff in an all boys school is so much worse than having to deal with, because at the very least, some girls at teenage level are a little bit more caring. And they are kind of a little bit more like, you know, hey, come on. They kind of socialise the guys a little bit, because girls tend to be a little bit more mature as well during the teenage years. But in terms of an all-boys school, I don't think I've ever dealt with an all-boys group here or in the past where I haven't gone, man, I'd hate to go to school here. And I hated to go to school where I was. So I'd hate to go to this school. Whereas I've been in a lot of mixed groups, and when I teach in mixed groups, I go, this is quite a nice place. And this is quite a nice group. And it's very hard to find an all-boys group where you go, hey, these guys are nice. You know, it's very difficult. There is that, maybe it's the testosterone element, maybe the hierarchical element is just so strong that it's so difficult, Sorry, but let's come back to the hockey team really quick, really briefly. So the difference between kind of stepping away from playing in a team sport with that complexity of like the teenage social thing going on, and suddenly now you're on the mat with men. With men and women. And it's no longer kids' playtime. Now we're in there. Was that a positive thing?
I think it was, yeah. Like a lot of the guys in Tullamore would have been like very like they would have been bigger men,
right?
Very into their lifting, and so I think that was like a very different environment than I've ever that I had ever experienced before. And like I think that brought me on physically as well.
Right. Yeah.
Because I wouldn't say coordination is my my biggest attribute. Like I'm still like a very uncoordinated.
You're talking to your friend here as well.
But, I think that exposure definitely helped a lot. Yeah. And I think jiu-jitsu is unique in that sense where like kids can get valuable, or like not kids, but like post-pubescent kids or pubescent kids can like get that help from adults in that early of a stage where they can tailor the resistance and whatnot during a round, and even if they go a little bit harder, that they're still able to deal with that, as opposed to like say more of an established sport like football or soccer, things like that, where you just never see like a 14-year-old training with an adult.
Very rare. Right, it has to be a particularly special kid. And even at that, the adult is gonna, like, when it comes to a training session, the adult's gonna make sure I'm not losing. I'm not losing to this kid. Whereas, I'm not saying this is every adult, but most adults won't mind being outskilled by a younger guy. They go, oh man, that kid's good. You know, that's all they'll say. Most adults. Some adults are a little bit.
I think on a social level as well, it was mad looking back. Like when I was 16, 17, I was going out, like, well, not going out, but like getting lunch with like some of the teammates that were like 10, 15 years plus my senior, like every weekend. Like on the Saturday, we used to go out like to lunch every Saturday, and it's mad looking back on that, like how
it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, but it's a real positive thing. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I think that's one of the great hidden amazing things about like jiu-jitsu environments, and a lot of the lads would say it here. So the lads who are kind of your age, a bit older now as well, they're kind of establishing careers now, or they're doing whatever they're doing, or they would have always said, when you ask them now what was one of the great things about being like a teenager on the mat with adults, and they were talking about, well, the different experiences you'd meet. So one of the guys, he's got a good career now. I won't say what he is or anything like that, but he actually said the first time he thought that he could do that was because he met somebody here who was doing it, and he went, hey, this guy isn't so different from me. And he had low expectations of himself, I suppose you would have said, when he was around 16, and then he was like, maybe I could do that. And then you hear people talking over and over again, you go, actually, I'm not so different from this guy. Maybe I could do that. Maybe I could be this way. But I think that is important, that mixed maturity, I think, is really important for like. I don't think we do that very well in other sports. I think we do it really well in jiu-jitsu. Well, it has its traps, right? But
I know. Obviously, you have to be careful.
Okay, so let's bring it up to training jiu-jitsu now. As we said before, you're 24 now, so this is your brown belt peak athletic.
Well, I hope it's not my peak yet.
Hopefully not. But definitely your peak period of between now and so probably. Do you know what though? I think Adam Wardzinski has changed the game. 32 years of age, winning the world championships. I would have thought his time had gone. So there's plenty of time left, and 8 years, God, that's a long time in jiu-jitsu. But tell me, like, how has ASD been a hindrance to you in terms of, let's start with negative first. Has it been a hindrance in any way to training, to developing yourself as an athlete?
Yeah, I feel definitely. And I think like I would have had challenges growing up, like especially in my juvenile years, in a different way, in terms of like socializing and whatnot and trying to find my place in the world. But like in recent times, I find I find training a lot more isn't like as taxing on my body, but like maybe a bit more mentally fatiguing. So like and like in terms of how much I can deal with. So growing up, I would have been able to, or like just say straight after school, I would have been able to train 2-3 times a day, like no problem. But I think it kind of like ebbs and flows a little bit more now. So like I'm very much able for it physically, like to train like multiple times a day, every day. But sometimes I think it catches up on me, and like say the expectations that I put on myself. Right. In terms of like things not going my way and whatnot, and I wouldn't say that's like completely like from an autism point of view, but I think there's like a little bit of a link up there. So like just like daily adult life is a little bit more more taxing on me, and like dealing with things like outside of jiu-jitsu, and I think those things tend to ball up. And maybe I don't know how I am compared to the average person, but when I get stressed, I don't think I have the best coping mechanisms for it, and I think that kind of tends to affect my jiu-jitsu as well.
Right.
So it kind of puts me off life altogether in a way, and then I get a little bit like desensitized to like how jiu-jitsu makes me feel, and like how and I know inherently what like jiu-jitsu does for me. Like after a session, like I'll pretty much 90% of the time I'll immediately feel relieved.
Right.
But like sometimes like I feel like so stressed and like so anxious coming up towards a session, where like I feel in a way I think I might have a little bit of OCD, in a way where I'm like in a sense I need to have certain things happen in a certain order during the day, and there's like a lot of link up between jiu-jitsu and OCD, or autism and OCD. Maybe jiu-jitsu and OCD
maybe
could
be some people,
but like where if say things have stressed me out during the day, or like I've had like a pretty packed day and I don't get to do certain tasks, like I feel like I haven't earned the right to do jiu-jitsu, or like do it in that specific order. So like sometimes if I have a busy morning, like where I'm supposed to do strength and conditioning or something, and I miss out on strength and conditioning, like that's in my head, like, oh, like jiu-jitsu is going to ruin my day, because like it's like I like my priority was strength and conditioning today, and like instead of jiu-jitsu, and then like sometimes I might say to myself like, oh, I might skip out on jiu-jitsu, or just like it kind of like it's seeping in my head, like it lingers in my head longer, and then like it gets the time, and then like sometimes like I'll train through that, or sometimes like I call it a night after, like so I think there's like an element of like obsessive compulsive thoughts and behaviors there.
To be in a certain order, in a certain way, and once it's not in that order, it's like everything just goes out the window.
Right. And then like sometimes like even if I miss out on jiu-jitsu, there might be a bit of like a self-destructive behavior, what's the word? Not self-destructive,
self-sabotage.
Self-sabotage, where then I wouldn't do the task that I wanted to do in the first place, and like I'd isolate myself a little bit more as a result, and it snowballs, and then eventually, like maybe like after I kind of get it together, like after I get back to jiu-jitsu, then I realize everything's okay.
Right.
So like it did that can come in cycles. So I found that like a little bit harder as of late, like the last few years, like last like say, I think since COVID really. Like I think COVID shake things up a little bit.
Yeah, I think it did for a lot of people. I think a lot of people got out of their routine, out of that pretty habitual thing, and then suddenly it's like, oh God, now I got to go back to real life, and how do I manage and how do I cope with all these balls in the air? Yeah, it's difficult. In terms of, I think there's two things that came to mind there when you were talking. The first one is that expression, which is I actually only heard in the last couple of years, which is don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And just being happy that things I did okay today, and not trying to be perfect all the
something
time.
Is better than nothing. Also.
And the other thing that sprung to mind was a friend of mine works with overweight people and he actually works in a clinic, and it's an obesity clinic essentially. One of the things that he talks about is this. He always calls it the packet of biscuits phenomenon, which is somebody has one biscuit and then they just eat the packet. And he's like, "What did you eat the packet for? If you had one?" But it was the sense of like, well, I had one. I felt that sense of shame that I had one, and then I just went, "Oh well, screw it all," and I just did the whole lot then. And that's like, it's kind of like, well, I did wrong anyway, so why not do everything? I may want to make everything terrible. When now that I'm making this terrible, I may have screwed up once. I may as well screw everything up. Yeah, so it's been like it's been harder to adapt to that. I think that could be a little bit of elements as well. We were talking about this about what they're with a couple of lads there on Saturday just after training. We were saying, what was your favourite belt to train at? And they were saying purple belt. No expectations. If you came in and a blue belt tapped you didn't care. And if a black belt tapped you didn't care. But when you got your brown belt, it's like, well, now I got to be at this level and I got to be kind of catching the black belt sometimes now. I can't let this guy tap me and I can't let this guy mount me. And then suddenly the expectations are larger. The other thing about that is it's a bit lonelier. Because up to purple belt, everybody's with you, right? And you got friends. And then you get your brown belt and black belt. Suddenly, you look around and there's not many people training like you. Like most people at this stage, and especially for you because you're doing professional events, you're doing high level events now, and you're coaching. Obviously, suddenly the peer group has they've stayed there while you've shot on. Do you find that a little bit?
Yeah, personally for me, I would have said like blue belt was maybe the time where I felt like I was most elated with jiu-jitsu. Like I'm very happy with jiu-jitsu, and I'm very grateful, like this is my life, but like I wouldn't say like I'm enamored like as much as I was as a blue belt, like just fresh out of school. Well, like I got my blue belt at 17, and then I would have it would have been a blue belt for nearly 3 years, and I just see that time of my life with a certain amount of fondness, like new beginnings and like a bit of naivety there as well.
And everything is new, and you're learning a new position almost every week.
Like I remember like fond times like of coming up doing camps with like training partners and being in the gym every day, like working on like new things every single day, and like just discovering a lot about myself and jiu-jitsu and traveling and whatnot. And I guess like I've been through the ringer now, and like I kind of like I'm not over it, but like there's not many things that I haven't seen. So I guess it's more about me finding like a place of contentment within myself and my training, and like understanding that like I'm not going to have as big like high peaks and like I'm not going to have as high peaks like in terms of like my emotional state anymore. It's just like I've grown up now. Like I'm trying like a little bit more of a level head, more of a what's it called? What's the philosophy? Like a more stoic philosophy, kind of. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's just like the way it is, and just
it's just development, right?
Maturity,
and maturity as well.
Because like they say, if you're like if you're having too big of a spike either side emotionally, like it's not necessarily a good thing.
I like the philosophy of sessions where. I got this from a coach called Dan Johnson, who's old school strength and conditioning coach. And he talks about the rule of 5, which is in every 5 sessions, you're going to have one that's like amazing, one that's absolutely terrible, like where you stink, and 3 where you're just okay. And actually, the 3 sessions is where you're actually at. But what most people think is they judge themselves on the other 2. They judge themselves on the one where they were brilliant and they went, oh, this is exactly the way I should be all the time. And then when they stink, well, actually, I'm terrible, I'm awful. But actually judge yourself on the 3. And I like that kind of thing, you know, those average of, I kind of think it helps a lot of people kind of understand that, you know, it's not a game of peaks and troughs. It's about kind of the middle bit where you are all the time, most of the time. So that's like in terms of where I guess it's hindered you, but where do you think there's any aspect where you think it's helped you?
In recent times, or more like
overall,
in general?
In general.
I think it's helped me deconstruct positions and help me think about positions more logically, and like how to train more logically, and like just my approach to coaching. I like to tout myself as a decent coach. I think like how I approach coaching is thought out, and it's like I put effort into it, and I think like I pride myself on the ability to problem solve very quickly as well in both jiu-jitsu and coaching. So I think like from like a very logical kind of perspective. So yeah, definitely has helped me there.
Right.
Yeah,
that's something that's I think when people are starting to get into coaching and people want to ask me about like coming here to teach kids classes, usually that's the main avenue when people ask me, and they always say, what should I work on? And I always say, well, the first thing is work on your organizational skills in terms of like what you're going to teach over long periods, for one, but also how you organize a class. Like you should never get to the middle of a class and go, oh crap, we haven't drilled yet. Oh, we haven't. So organizational skills, I think, and like planning and stuff like that, I think it's massively underrated, because people think that it's the people often think about coaching and they think it's like the thing you say in the corner. When people say in the MMA coaching, it's the corner man is the guy who's like, no, it's the 6 weeks he did before that. That's what he really did. And you only ever see the cornering, the bit where he goes, that's it, throw the left jab. Oh, genius. But actually it was the 6 to 8 weeks before that, or even maybe the 2 years where he had this guy in the gym developing him before that. And that's the key. And I think when you're coaching kids as well, right? You're coaching, mainly coaching kids.
From the age of 4 up until adults,
you brave man.
Yes,
right. Fair play.
That's I think the 4-year-olds can be a little bit harder, and I've talked with Peter a lot of this, because he's been very influential in mentoring me as well in my coaching. So say before when I was in Tullamore, and like I still train there when I can, and like I like to represent both gyms, but like just at the moment I'm full time in jungle coaching and training. And when I was in Tullamore, I was kind of learning for myself, and like Kieran is a very busy man, and like so you would have left more of the coaching to me, and I had like a lot of discovery there in terms of like what was good, what were good practices for me to coach, and a little bit lucky as well, because I only had the teens class as well, so that was a lot easier.
Their own challenges though, definitely.
Since I've been up in Dublin with jungle, I've been tasked with like the younger groups as well. So a problem I would have had like starting off was coming across from like a very logical perspective, and like obviously so it's hard. So I had to rein myself back. So I think there's like a lot of a challenge there in terms of trying to appeal to them and come to their level and adjust during a class. So being flexible during the class is very important, I think, and especially for those kids, because you can't expect anything. You can't expect like that they're going to respond to anything that you ask them to do.
When
you can't fight
have they had a good day? Has their parents just filled them with sugar before they sent them in? Or it's all changeable, right? It's a real.
So sometimes they're lovely, and like sometimes like you think, wow, I did a great job there, like crushed it, and then like days like yesterday, not good at all.
Crashed and burned.
So that's been more of a struggle for me as of late, trying to figure out how to navigate the younger classes, especially with like how I like to approach, because I find like coaching adults and coaching people who are a lot more like giving them ideas and concepts and things to center back on are a lot easier, where the kids, it's kind of more like if you go too conceptual with them, or like obviously like it's just gonna they're not going to resonate.
There's a certain certain percentage of them will get it, but most of them will probably be left behind. It's an art form in itself, really. Communicating with kids is an art form. Never mind teaching them.
People management, it's at the end of the day.
And that's like, but do you think that that's a positive? Is it definitely a good thing for you? Like, is that a strength that you're developing, or is it?
I'm definitely developing. It's definitely stressed me out. Right? I'm not gonna lie, but I think it's for the better. Like, I think you can't get better without stressing something. That's literally what the development and change is. It's like something stressing. it's like if you're talking about like building muscle, like you're stressing the muscles in a certain way to achieve adaptation, you know. So right, like anything to create adaptation, you need stress in a certain way. Now obviously like trying to manage that is important too. So like if you go over a certain amount in any kind of area in life of stress, like it's probably deleterious, and it's not going to help. But like I think I need to challenge myself.
There's a happy medium of challenge versus overwhelmed kind of nature. And that's like a management issue, and particularly when you talk about ASD, that's something that you do logically. And very often when I speak to people like in similar situations to yourself, I actually think, you know, in terms of personal management, that's something you've had to learn, and you've had to, a bit like we were just talking off camera about coaching, about people who learn, about coaches who come almost from outside being good at the sport and end up being great coaches because they have to logically break it down because they weren't naturally good. Would you say that that's something that you've had to do in your life, like something where you've had to say, well, look, I need to, because we were talking earlier about mask, and we were talking earlier about, so has that been a thing where you've said, right, well, I need to break this down into its constituent parts to get good at it? And would you say that's a bonus for coaching? Like in terms of living, I suppose, first, you know, in terms of general life?
I would say, like, in terms of socializing, yeah, definitely. Like, I felt like I've had to learn very fast over the last, say, a couple of years. So I would have started in a jungle coaching last year. I would have been commuting a lot of last year. Like I was still living at home in Tullamore, so those commutes were tough. So I had it very comfortable in Tullamore. Looking back now, like even though I felt like I needed the change and I felt like I needed to grow a little bit more, moving out of the house, and I had it very comfortable back then.
So, it was easy, like getting your laundry done for you. And
5-minute drive to the gym every day, like no traffic. Like it was pretty easy. But like it's I had my own challenges back then, but like I have new challenges now, and like things are easier in certain ways and things are harder in certain ways. But yeah, I think like I've had to learn fast over this like last year and a half, 2 years, and try to adapt. From a logical
point of view, right?
Perspective, like I guess it's kind of given me like a better sense of feeling like an adult as well. Like I would have never thought I would see myself living on my own, or being self-sufficient. Back then, like it was during COVID, it was like a very rough time because like I had basically no income for like a long time because there was just no classes to teach, and I got into this like vicious cycle of like making myself think that like I wasn't worthy of like earning or like of being able to do things for myself or feeling self-sufficient, and that got pretty dark. So being able to be self-sufficient for myself now, and like having a position of authority and like of responsibility I think has helped me in that sense.
Really confidence building.
So
it's like anything. Once you've done it for a little while, suddenly you look around and you go, wait a minute, what was I so worried about? Yeah. What was that all about? Oh God,
I don't know if that answers your question of in terms of
no, I'm happy to ramble. I'm not so. I'm in the. We've got about 10 minutes left. I guess what I'm trying to get across is like, from the perspective of like. Managing your own training, managing your own development, like, is that something that you've logically broken down in the same way? Like in terms of how you train, how you do your everyday athletic life, from developing new positions that you wanted to work on, anything like that, you know? Yeah,
I guess so. Yeah, I suppose that's always how I've been. Like it wouldn't have been as of recent. Like I guess like during my whole development. Well, like from the early stages, I would have been like this. I would have seen things very logically, in terms of how I'd organize my training. Like, okay, so if I wouldn't do like 3 jiu-jitsu sessions in a day, and then the next day like do 2 strength and conditioning sessions. Like I'd try to like I would lay out my training, in an orderly manner, and like I'd think about like how I'd organize like from day to day a little bit better. So I think I've been good with dealing with that, and like kind of cutting back on certain things and adding things in more, and like programming in the lead up to a competition in terms of like peaking and going down. So like I think I'm pretty good with that. Yeah.
You're pretty. Yeah, it's and again, to come back to another thing I touched on, I think it's interesting the way that, you know, you're talking there very logically about how you coping with stress, coping with change, coping with things like that.
Yeah.
I wonder, are there, I think, I'm almost certain, in fact, that there are lessons in there for the average person to look at and say, hey, look, maybe I need to take a step back and organize in this way, take a more kind of global view of how I'm feeling, you know, a step back from how I'm feeling and what's making me stressed, what inputs are making me exhibit certain behaviors. Because like, again, I think there's a big movement towards resilience now among younger people and so on, and if all you got to do is open up the sort of newspapers that I read and things that I read and the journals that I read, and it's all around developing resilience, reducing anxiety, reducing stress in younger people in particular. And people have spoken, I think I remember reading something maybe it could have been as close to 15 years ago. It was like the oncoming mental health crisis was what it was called. And I think we are actually in the middle of it. I think this is essentially what we're talking about. And I think a lot of it is to do with stress management, and a lot to do with how we cope with the emotions that we're feeling, the perfectly natural emotions and coping strategies. But you've got, obviously you're saying it's not perfect for you, but you've got, certainly from talking to you now, you seem to identify those much better than other people do, and the average, I would say, 24-year-old would. You can kind of spot them, and you can identify your patterns of behavior. Would that be fair?
I guess maybe not like right in the moment, but like I think I'm good at analyzing, say, after the fact, and like maybe like building upon ways that I can do better in the next coming days after. Right. Say I have like some kind of episode like that, or and then like I think a lot of the time, I wonder if it's like these feelings that kind of pop up are a result of like of external factors that happen to me like in daily life, or like if I'm feeling a certain way from like experiences that I've had, or if it's like just a general pathos that I have as well. So like if it's just like how my brain works, that is causing me to feel more stressed, or if it's maybe there's some. I'm in the process of getting some psychiatric evaluation for like other things, because I felt like as of late, like I'm not quite sure if it's just like fully autism, right? That's causing some of my problems. Like it might be like something to do with like a personality disorder kind of area, and like I've been trying to look into some of that, like and I'm not quite sure if that is, or maybe it's just like I'm overthinking things, and sometimes I think whether it's the pathos or like it's whether the actual stress stuff that's causing
and it's difficult to divide the two.
So that's something I put a lot of thought into.
To break that down, I suppose, for people watching, is it how much of this is just normal life, and how much of this is me and how I cope with normal life. I think that's a difficulty for a lot of people. Once you've been diagnosed with something, or once a term has been put on it, it's like, well, what's me and what's it? And it's very hard to divide or combine the two. Like it's difficult for you, I suppose. It's difficult for anybody in your situation, in your experience. And well, look, we'll finish up there. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Because this has been, I could go another half hour easily.
I could go.
It's been day. Great. It's been, I actually I knew it would be anyway. It's not that I had a lack of confidence that it wouldn't be, but I knew it would be a fascinating conversation. But certainly it's been. We've eaten up, I think, the guts of an hour there. And probably some. But is there anything you want to say before you sign off? Anything in particular, or is there anyone you want to?
No, I'm just very grateful for you to have me on the podcast. And just in terms of like what's coming up for me, I don't know when this is going to come out. I have Nogi Europeans coming up in a few weeks. So hopefully by the time this comes out, I'll come away with a medal.
So let's change now. So I'm sitting here with European gold medalist Jack Dolan.
And then as of right now, I'll have Kaizen grappling
Right,
league coming up very soon. Yes, so
definitely won't be out before that, but we'll we'll be able to use this as a kind of
fingers crossed success
historical documents.
I've for your preparation. Kids Europeans as well that I'm going over with a couple of the kids.
Oh, I'll see you there. Yeah. Okay,
nice.
You're going over. Great. Yeah. We'll be over here for we'll see you there. My son's at it, and
very good.
So is a couple of other kids. From the gym here, so that'll be cool. Yeah. So great coaching challenges upcoming, great personal challenges.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Jack, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.